reason why I was stuck at the office while my superiors went golfing with former clients. Maybe that was why something about the sad young woman's smile had resonated with me. And by the time that she had sat down at my desk, the biometric security system had already worked up a profile that had told me the value of her wardrobe, the likelihood that she was armed or mentally unstable, and of course, her identity. Even before the information flashed across my screen, however, I thought she looked familiar. She was Rosha Goldham, the recent widow of construction mogul Isaac Goldham. Isaac had been gunned down after hours at one of his work sites just over a week ago. "Before you ask," the blonde began, "I've already told all of this to the police. I can't blame them for not believing me. I can hardly believe it myself." I tried not to think about the 35-year age gap between Rosha and her deceased husband, or the fact that her shoes alone were worth more than what I made in a month. At the agency, we were paid on commission. If I could land Rosha Goldham as a client, I would finally be making the kind of money and connections that it took to succeed in this business. I did my best to look sympathetic as I leaned across my desk and asked how I could help. "I would tell you my name," the blonde said, "but you know that already, don't you? Just like how you know about what happened to my husband." I nodded. In situations like this, it was usually best to just let the client talk. "What you probably don't know," she went on, "is that Isaac wasn't alone. I followed him to the worksite that night, and I saw the man who killed him." I fought to keep the surprise off my face. As far as I knew, the police didn't have any leads on the Goldham case. Rosha, meanwhile, had already launched into a description of the crime. "Oh, it might sound silly to you, detective, but I went after Isaac that night because I thought he might be cheating. I mean, where else would a multimillionaire be going on a rainy Wednesday at 2 in the morning without telling his wife? At any other time, I'm sure he would have noticed me, but something had him distracted. He parked illegally a few blocks over and squeezed through a cut in the fence like he had been doing it all his life. My heels got stuck in the mud trying to keep up with them. Have you ever been in a construction zone after hours, detective?" I shook my head. "Oh, it's dark, real dark. Apart from the lights they leave on to keep away the copper thieves. There's big, shadowy piles of junk everywhere. Ragged plastic that rattles in the wind. Cords tangled on the floor like the tentacles of some monster." Rosha shuddered. Only the skeleton of the apartment complex was finished. Isaac went down some stairs on the side, toward where the basement was going to be, and that was as far as he got. What could he have been looking for down there, detective? It was nothing but a bunch of bare concrete hallways and drain pipes. Rosha drew in a deep breath. "I thought the guy was a squatter at first. I mean, he had on this long coat and wide-brimmed hat, the kind that went out of style like 100 years ago. Anyway, I saw something gleam in his hand. It was the barrel of a gun. I screamed, Isaac turned, and the stranger started blasting. I've never heard anything so loud. And in the light of the gunfire, I saw him. He was so pale that I could see the veins beneath his skin. His teeth looked longer than they should have been, like his gums had rotted away or something. And his face was..." The young widow buried her face in her hands. I got some hot tea from the coffee stand and I placed it in front of her. She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. "Oh, I'm sorry," Rosha sobbed. "After the shooting finally stopped, the stranger lifted a grate and climbed down a ladder. The police told me that it leads into the drainage tunnels." Rosha took the tissue that I offered her, blew her nose, and then suddenly looked up at me with fierce, tearful blue eyes. You know what people are saying, right? A young widow, a big fortune, an unsolved murder. It doesn't matter what any jury decides. If this ends here, I'm going to be a pariah for the rest of my life. So it wasn't about justice. It was about her. I couldn't say that I was surprised. But if Rosha Goldham wanted to pay me several $100 an hour to go stomping through the sewers in search of a pale boogeyman in a trench coat, who was I to argue? I took down a few more details and promised to contact her as soon as I had something. My next call was to Mickey Falstaff at the records office. I don't know what my superiors had on Mickey, but he could get us any documents that we needed from the local government, without the red tape. I told him that I needed some maps of the sewer system. When he asked what for, I laughed and told him that I was hunting a ghost. For some reason, Mickey didn't seem to think that that was funny. He promised to send over the plans that I had requested, but he cautioned me to compare them to the past decades' missing persons reports before I did anything else. There was a significant overlap. I mean, of course there was. The drainage tunnel access points were likely to be in rough neighborhoods and isolated areas. Exactly the sorts of places where people were likely to disappear. It was so obvious that I wondered just what the hell Mickey had meant by that ominous warning of his. An hour later, I was outside the drainage tunnel entrance that was nearest to the murder scene, and geared up with thick rubber boots and multiple sources of light. I still hadn't told my employers or anybody else where I was going. I needed to find something for Rosha before some more experienced agent swooped in and stole her away from me. I was breaking half a dozen agency rules already, and if I didn't return to the surface with something, I could kiss my career goodbye. The first thing that I noticed was the smell. A putrid, greenish odor like if water could rot. I followed it to the far side of an abandoned lot, trying not to cut myself on the torn open chain link fence. There it was, a lightless, cylindrical tunnel. Somebody had built a ragged lean-to among all the garbage by its entrance. They had lit a fire in a rusty barrel too, but otherwise there was no sign of them. I switched on my headlamp and continued inside. The further that I got from the daylight, the less that I wanted to leave it behind. The walls were covered with graffiti. Somebody had smeared crap, or maybe tar, on one of them in a manner that struck me as almost artistic. Something brushed against the back of my neck. I hoped it was a cobweb. The tunnel turned and I found myself in true darkness, alone except for the trickle of the water in the slimy culvert beside me. The shanty's trash and other signs of human occupation began to disappear. The tunnel connected with another larger gallery where water poured from pipes into a sinister black pool below. According to my map, the place where Isaac Goldham had been shot was about 100 feet above and to my right. I began moving a little more slowly, searching for a boot print, a shell casing, or any other sign of the mysterious machine gunner. Unlike the police who had been through here earlier, I had every incentive to believe Rosha's story and take my time. But after an hour of searching, I still had nothing. I passed the access ladder leading up to Goldham's construction site, which had been sealed off by police tape even down here. I was making another pass through these surrounding tunnels when I realized that I had missed a turn. I retraced my steps to the previous intersection, but the view in all four directions was the same. Concrete, graffiti, debris, and darkness. I made a little pile of rubble and placed a coin on top of it to mark my place, and then I continued on ahead. If I didn't encounter the gallery with the black pool after several minutes, I could just return to my marker and try a different passage. That way, I was bound to find the exit tunnel eventually. Or so I thought. After 5 minutes of walking, there was no end to the first passage in sight. I turned back to try the second, but I never found my marker. As impossible as it was to believe, the shiny penny that I had placed there had somehow vanished. Who could it have been? One of the vagrants who inhabited these tunnels. A rat. I had seen several pairs of beady red eyes as I explored the tunnels, and every time I squeezed around a pile of rubbish, I hoped that I wouldn't look down and find a pair of yellowed teeth about to sink into my ankle. Without it, however, I was truly lost. I stayed that way until I stumbled across another passage, one that seemed less used than the others. Maybe it had even been part of an earlier construction that was never walled off. It wasn't where I had come from, but it might have been the path that Isaac Goldstein's murderer had taken. If so, it would also give me a way out of the sewers. The tattered piles of wood and trash that clogged it hadn't been left by the homeless. They had been dragged in by flooding water and left behind when it receded. Something skittered along the wall as I brushed aside the ragged remains of a tarp. And that's when I saw the door. An old, thick piece of bare metal with a waterproof seal. This, I was sure, didn't appear on Mickey Falstaff's maps. I rummaged in my pack for a crowbar and shimmied the seal open until I could cut the lock. I noticed uneasily that the door could be padlocked from either the inside or the outside. There was no scurry of vermin within. It was just a dank, narrow hallway. But at its end was a white, panel-frame door, like something out of an old-fashioned house. There was even an iron porch lamp above it. If I strained my ears, I thought that I could even hear music. A woman laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound more suited to a cocktail bar than the depths of a sewer. And that eerily ordinary-looking door began to open, and for some reason my blood ran cold. I dashed back into the passage, switched off my headlamp, and crouched behind a heap of junk listening. "Oh, where are you going, Bert?" "Oh, thought I heard somebody." A deep male voice slurred. The clack of fancy shoes echoed in the hallway. I caught a whiff of old-fashioned cologne, cigar smoke, whiskey, and gun oil. I held my breath. "Oh, there's nothing out there but the rats," another man yelled. "So you'll fit right in." There was another peal of laughter. Then came a clatter of clanging metal and a grunt of surprise. Bert had found the lock that I had cut. "What the hell?" he mumbled. I bit down a scream as something with a lot of legs crawled across my hand. "I know you're here, jackass," Bert shouted into the tunnel. "If you come out right now and don't make me go looking for you, maybe we can be friends. If not..." He trailed off and stepped out into the passage. Despite not having any source of light apart from the cracked open door behind him, the stranger navigated through the tangled junk with ease. An impossible thought occurred to me. He could see in the dark. If that was true, he would find me as soon as he turned around. I did some quick mental math, calculating the distance to the nearest bend in the tunnel, and then I made a run for it. The man called Bert spun immediately. The boom of his automatic rifle was deafening. "Oh, don't go," he shouted. "The fun's just getting started." I slipped in the slimy water and crawled on my hands and knees around the corner, panting. Through the painful ringing in my ears, I could barely hear my pursuer's footsteps, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. And in a sense, he did. I was going to die here, I realized, gunned down in a sewer by some psycho with a machine gun. Still, I didn't have to make it easy for him. And gritting my teeth against the pain, I got to my feet and ran blindly ahead, feeling my way along the wall for the next passage. My shin bashed against the corner of a discarded bathtub. Spiders scrambled angrily across my face as I crashed through the tattered remains of a shower curtain that had gotten tangled up in the pipes overhead. More ear-splitting gunshots lit the tunnel ahead. I had almost made it to the next intersection. The remains of a tin can exploded near my feet. Bert wolf whistled at me. He was enjoying this, I realized. Maybe he was even missing on purpose, trying to see how far he could run me before I collapsed from exhaustion. He was playing with me like some sick-minded kid torturing a bug. But the longer that I stayed alive, the greater my chances of escape would be. I faced my headlamp backward, switched it on, and was rewarded by an angry snarl as the bright beam spoiled my pursuer's night vision. I caught a glimpse of a bulky silhouette similar to Roche's description. Fedora, pinstripe suit, a horribly pale face with dark, tiny eyes. Bert's curses were drowned out by another burst of gunfire. He had missed again, but instinct told me that my little trick had taken the joy out of the game for him. Now he was shooting to kill. I took a left and then another. I spotted daylight coming from a shoulder-wide pipe in the wall and I scrambled into it. I squeezed through until I saw an ordinary sewer grate up ahead. As I jumped up to pull myself out into the street, I took a final look back down the pipe. Although I couldn't be sure, I thought that I saw the reflection of daylight on a pair of shiny shoes. I had crawled out into a neighborhood of overgrown lots and shuttered rundown houses. The elderly woman and child on the opposite sidewalk avoided eye contact with me, and I couldn't say that I blamed them. I was filthy, wide-eyed, and cut in a dozen places. But I was alive. I had confirmed that the psycho from Roche's story was real. I even had some idea of where to find him. Still, as exclusive as the agency was, we weren't some paramilitary force. With my phone back in service, the first call I made was to the police. It was the strangest interaction that I ever had with law enforcement. A young, disbelieving officer took me to an interrogation room, where a few hours later a plainclothes detective heard my story and told me to wait some more. 2 hours passed before a middle-aged woman in a suit stalked into the room and threw the lock that I had severed onto the steel table. Trespassing, vandalism, destruction of government property. She ran down a list. Oh, and that's just a start. If you ever bring this up again, we'll prosecute you for all of it to the fullest extent of the law. Oh, those maximum penalties might not seem like much. The gray-haired woman grinned cruelly. Oh, but believe me, they add up. Oh, and I suggest you prepare a box for any possessions you still have at your agency. I've just spoken with the chief of the board. You're officially out of a job. Might be a good time to start over, huh? Maybe in another town. Someplace with better prospects. Think about it. The woman turned to go. In less than 30 seconds, she had completely taken apart my life, and I didn't even know her name. I stood, my jaw hanging open. The young officer that I had spoken with earlier was there, but the indulgent smile was gone from his face. He gripped my arm none too gently and led me out of the station. I felt like a stranger in my own city. I thought about the apartment that I had just moved into, confident that my high-paying job at the agency would cover the rent. I could last for another 2 months, maybe 3, but after that, who could say? The agency wasn't exactly going to give me a glowing reference. I pondered what the woman had said. I could pack my bags and head back to the West Coast like a dog with its tail between its legs. Or I could pay a visit to Rocha Goldham. The Goldham place was an imposing downtown structure with views of the lake. Not that there was much to see on such a dreary afternoon. Between the silence and the gray rain drumming against the windows, it reminded me of an overpriced mausoleum. And there was a semicircular desk beside the elevators where a doorman or security guard might have sat, but it was empty. I buzzed Rosha's penthouse myself and she let me up immediately. "Oh my God," she said instead of hello. "What happened to your face?" Although my exploration gear was tucked away in my backpack, the cuts and bruises from my flight through the sewers were obvious. I fidgeted with my hat and fumbled for an answer. Without my desk, my cutting-edge computer, and the reputation of the agency like to back me up, I felt surprisingly lost. And it didn't help that Rosha was so damn beautiful. She had changed into a simple, eloquent black dress. Her cheeks were flushed with emotion. I decided to begin with the most important, obvious thing that I could. I told Rosha that I believed her. I told her that I really had found something in the drainage tunnels, and although I wasn't sure what we were dealing with, I was willing to see it through to the bitter end. Her result wasn't what I had expected. She pushed away from the ultra-chic couch that she had been leaning on, crossed the room and threw her arms around me. Her lips brushed against my ear as she spoke. "He's in the closet, aiming at both of us. He told me that he would kill me if I didn't invite you up. I'm sorry." My eyes darted over Rosha's shoulder to the lightless, cracked open hall closet. A polished black shoe nudged open the door. I knew the rhythm of those footsteps, and now to my horror, I could see the rest of the stranger clearly. Beneath the harsh lights of Rosha's apartment, his skin seemed almost transparent. The hole where his nose used to be made his face appear skull-like. There was nothing weak or sickly about his eyes. However, their oversized black pupils sparkled with cruel intelligence. He wasn't a monster. He was a man just like me. And somehow that made it worse. "A long time no see, buddy," he sneered. The recession of his purplish gums made his teeth appear to be nearly twice the normal length. "Walk." He waved a revolver in our direction, and then tucked it into the pocket of his overcoat. If either of us tried to shout a warning, the other would be dead before anyone could help. We were marched back through the lobby and out into the rain. I thought I knew now why the security guard's chair had been empty. The pale stranger led us to a back alley manhole cover and gestured at me to lift it. Everything that I had ever heard about kidnappers, murderers, and second locations flashed through my head. But I knew from experience that we would both be gunned down right here if I didn't cooperate. For the second time that day, I climbed down into the drainage tunnels. The stranger handed Rosha a clunky old-fashioned flashlight and ordered her to go after me. He dropped down behind us with feline grace. "Walk," he repeated. Rosha and I did as we were told. Apart from the distant noise of rushing water, there was nothing to mark the passage of time. It felt like forever before we had arrived at another one of those rusted, slab-like metal doors. The stranger tossed me a key and told me to open the padlock. An unsettling question gnawed at me. If the pale gunman and his accomplices came from within the metal doors, why were they sometimes padlocked from the outside? The corridor on the other side was identical to the one that I had encountered before, down to the white wood panel door and the wrought iron porch lamp. Before it had felt eerily out of place. Now it felt like if I walked through it, I would never come out again. "Oh, just couldn't let it go, could ya?" the stranger was saying. "Just had to stick your nose in a little further, and look where it got ya." "Knock 3 times," he told Rosha. Slow. She followed his instructions, and when she saw the man on the other side, she screamed. A hideous growth covered half of his face, swelling shut his right eye. But I had no doubt that he could see well enough to use the machine gun that he was holding. A shiver ran through me. Who the hell were these disfigured men? And why were they dressed like they had walked out of the 1930s? Bert. The disfigured man smiled with empty gums. Oh, look what the cat dragged in. The boss is gonna be pleased. Especially with her. He made a noise that might have been a whistle as he leered at Rosha. And then, without warning, he bashed the butt of his weapon into my nose. I went down, blood spurting from it. Pugh, Bert grunted. Can't even stand a little love tap. He kicked my ribs with the tip of one of his polished shoes. Now you see why we've got the red carpet. He wasn't kidding. The stuff might have been fancy at one time, but years of dampness and overuse had taken their toll. With its unevenness and dark patches, the maroon floor looked like a roughening sea of blood. There was particle board and wallpaper on the walls, although it too was peeling away in ragged yellow straps. Something seemed off about the antique brass lamps. It took me a moment to realize that they were lit by gas. 100 years ago, this place would have been the lap of luxury, but now it looked like a badly cared for antique shop. Another kick connected with my kidney, and I decided to keep my comments about the decor to myself. Walk, Bert snarled, or better yet, crawl. He hung his fedora beside several others at the door and ran his fingers through his scabbed, greasy, half-fallen-out hair. Not wanting to give him the satisfaction, I lurched to my feet and staggered down the hallway beside Rosha, pressing a fist against a worrying pain in my side. We veered left, and I gasped at what I saw around the corner. It was a ballroom complete with chandeliers, a bandstand, and a grand staircase. Several girls in barely their dresses lounged against the bar, fear and resignation in their sunken eyes. Another overweight man in a gaudy suit lounged behind it, fiddling with a phonograph. The white tablecloths were threadbare, the plaster on the ceiling cracked. The moisture in the air made the frescoed angels appear to be crying ink-black tears. What the hell was this place? A pair of double doors swung open on the far side of the room. Two of the girls glanced up as we passed. One seemed like she wanted to shout a warning, and the other seemed to be considering making a grab for the big man's gun while he was distracted, but decided against it. The third stared at the counter, too drunk or traumatized to react to our presence. And with a shudder, I realized why they looked so familiar. All three could have been grown-up versions of some of the missing persons photos that I had seen earlier. A pair of double doors opened on the other side. Two men, young, uncomfortable in their baggy outfits, and not quite so disfigured, held them open for us. Within, a group played cards around a table. The light was so dim that I couldn't make out much more than their hands and shirt sleeves. "This is them, boss," Bert announced, bowing his head respectfully. The large man at the rear of the table waved a large, scarred hand. The other card players backed away into the shadows. He snapped his fingers and somebody brought him a gin and tonic on a silver plate. For a minute, there was no sound but the hammering of my heart against my chest. Then the man that they called Boss finished his long, slow sip. "Let me ask you a question," he said, arms wide open and treacherously friendly. "Just who do you think you're dealing with here?" These psychos were going to torture us to find out what we knew and then kill us. I could see that clearly now. It might be slower or faster, more or less painful, depending on what I said. But no matter what, the outcome would be the same. Rage boiled over inside of me. "A bunch of freaks in cheap suits," I snapped. "You're something out of a bad gangster movie." Bert moved to hit me, but the boss held up a hand. "Oh, a gangster movie, huh?" he mocked. "You've ever heard of somebody called Alphonse Capone?" I glared. Chicago's most famous crime boss had been dead for nearly a century, but just about everybody in the city knew his name. "Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Let me ask you another question. You really think a guy like that with all those millions would just let himself get locked up behind bars? There have always been lookalikes willing to go to prison to protect their families, and there have been tunnels in this city since the 1860s. "So what?" I snorted. "You want me to believe that you're Al Capone?" "His great-grandson, actually. And if you're asking yourself why we're allowed to go on doing business down here, just look at what happened to Mr. Isaac Goldham, murdered by a guy with no fingerprints, no birth certificate, and absolute loyalty to me. How many others do you think we've washed over the years? Why get rid of us when we can be so useful to the powers that be?" "And the disappearances," I challenged. "Well, I mean, we gotta repopulate somehow, right?" The boss laughed. "Our connections up top take care of the rest. They keep us in good food and good liquor, even send down medicine to keep us from getting any, sicker. And in return, we do what we do best." I thought about the weird facial sores, the rotted off limbs and skin that never saw sunlight. Hadn't the real Al Capone died of syphilis? Regardless of whether there was any truth to what this psychopath was saying, the symptoms lined up. I was no doctor, but even I knew that the horrible mutations that I had seen down here could be prevented if treatment happened early enough. But did the boss and his goons know that? If somebody up above wanted to control and use these twisted underground hitmen, then making them medically dependent would be a perfect strategy. "Oh, it's been nice talking to you. We don't get many visitors down here, you know," the boss commented. "And besides, there's something, I don't know, refreshing about spilling your guts to some stranger. Confession's good for the soul, they say. And while they've got plenty of ladies and liquor down here, we ain't got no priest. They take their secrets to the grave, you know. And you will too." The boss leaned forward and grinned. From the top of his nose to the bottom of his chin, the center of his face was a single gruesome, weeping sore from which his teeth stuck out at jagged angles, like bent tombstones. He snapped his fingers again and strong hands closed around Rosha and I, pulling us apart. I fought to hang on to her, but somebody punched me in the stomach. The last things that I saw before the double doors swung shut was the look of wide-eyed terror on her face. I was dragged back through the decaying ballroom and down another hallway. I caught a glimpse of a kitchen, a storage closet, even an antiquated gymnasium. There was everything a certain type of person could want, except for sunlight. And then it was out another door, down a flight of slime-covered stairs, and into a dripping concrete corridor lit only by Bert's flashlight. The complex was enormous, part palace, part prison, part foul spiderweb that linked to every drainage tunnel in the city. I thought about the rats that I had seen before. If there were any down here, they were probably bigger and more aggressive than I could possibly imagine. Bert kicked something as he walked. It was a skull, I realized numbly, just like the plastic ones that were hung up in science classrooms or what you would see on Halloween. Only this one was real. Mold grew out from a hole in its cranium. There was another staircase ahead, one that looked far older and more dilapidated than the first. It disappeared into dark water halfway down. No matter what, I told myself I wasn't going to go down those steps. Bert set down the flashlight. A gesture passed between him and the other goon restraining me. Before I knew what was happening, Bert had pinned me by my throat against the grimy wall while the other pulled off my clothes. Laughing, they shoved me down the slick stairs and into the water. I'll never forget that feeling. It was oily, cluttered with offal and grease, and freezing cold. I stepped gingerly, knowing that one bent nail or jagged piece of glass would foil any chance that I had of escape. A rusty steel grate clanged shut behind me. Was this a prison, a torture pit? What the hell had been the point of dumping me down here without even a stitch of clothing? The beam of the flashlight grew further away. I realized with horror that they were going to leave me here, in the pitch blackness and chilling, scummy water. Even Bert's presence was better than that. I shouted after them, but they were already gone. It was the deepest darkness that I had ever known. Something splashed into the water. I wished that I had looked in the opposite direction, that I had gotten some idea of the way ahead while I could. Because now all that I could do was feel my way blindly along the stone. And there was light up ahead, the same dim, eerie gaslight that illuminated the whole complex. I didn't want to move toward it, but waiting in the foul water was even worse. The slow sloshing of my footsteps felt like some kind of countdown. I didn't understand what the round space was until another grate clanged down behind me. I was in a pit about 30 feet across, constructed of slick, rough brick. Shadowy figures looked down on me. I could hear chatter and the clinking of glasses above. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I realized that the space above had the same gaudy style as the ballroom that we had been marched through before. The faces watching were also familiar. I recognized Bert, the boss, several of the other gangsters and their victims, as well as Rosha. At some point, she had been forced to change into one of the same sheer flapper dresses that the other girls wore, complete with a feathered headband. A red velvet rope lowered into the pit. A shirtless figure scrambled down it. He had the same sores and wide, light-deprived pupils as the others, but he was barely more than a teenager. My stomach turned at the thought that kids grew up down here, surrounded by decadence, decay, and violence. They became the next generation of killers. And that was why I hadn't been gunned down on sight. They had been saving me, I realized, to serve in this boy's initiation ritual. He spat, flexed, and cracked his neck. Somebody tossed a pair of switchblades into the ankle-deep water. "Time for your first blood, Joey." The boss's voice rumbled down from on high. "Show us his guts in you," he said to me. "If you win, you and your girl can walk out of here. No strings attached. How's that for a deal?" As an answer, I stooped, snatched the knife, and held it at the ready. The boy kicked his up and caught it with a flourish. He puffed his chest out at me, trying to look intimidating, but the uncertainty in his eyes was obvious. His muscular build had made him look older than he was. Now that we were face to face, I was sure that he couldn't have been more than 14 years old. Now, I was no Navy SEAL, but the agency didn't hire anyone who couldn't handle themselves in a fight. The kid lunged, but he didn't overextend. Somebody had trained him well. He kicked water at my face before his next cut, but the motion threw him off balance. I dived in and shoulder tackled him while he still had one hand in the air. The boy tried to stab downward into my shoulder, but the blade fell from his hands and clattered away. The room echoed with boos and cheers. I lifted my knife on high and the boy cringed. I hesitated, and that was all the advantage that he needed. He elbowed the side of my head and rolled me. He pinned my wrist, bashing it again and again into the ground until I let go of my only weapon. His strong, bone-white fingers gripped my throat. As I struggled to break free, he headbutted me, and then leaned in and whispered into my ear, "Play dead. Even if you win, they'll shoot you anyway." It sounded much less like a lie than what the boss had told me. The boy pretended to strangle me and I played along. My nose was already bleeding, and the blood in the water made the lie look more real than it might have otherwise. "Oh, that was quick," Bert complained. From where I floated with my eyes shut tight, I could hear the clunking of his enormous antique gun. "Oh, say boss, how about I light him up a little bit? That guy had me running all over the city." "Save it," the boss cut in. "I need you to go take out this law student up by Devon Avenue. She's been asking some ugly questions about where the public works money goes." Still grumbling, Bert lumbered off. "That was some fast thinking, Joey. I was afraid that he had you for a minute." The boy's footsteps splashed as he walked to the pit wall and scrambled back up the velvet rope. Rosha was crying. "Flush him," the boss sighed. Another grate screeched open. Water flooded into the pit, lifting me up and carrying me along with it. I was swept down a second filthy passage. Clumps of algae, discarded cans, and worse things brushed against me as I passed. The light at the end of the tunnel was getting further and further away. I clenched my teeth to keep from crying out as I bumped against a pile of something jagged. I couldn't see what this stuff was, but it was everywhere, piled so thick and tall that water could barely slip through. As something brushed against my bare foot, I reached out and gripped it, afraid that it was some kind of horrible underground creature. But it was only the leg of the pants that I had been wearing earlier. The rest of my possessions followed behind. They had been disposed of right along with me, and among them was my waterproof headlamp. I switched it on and finally realized what the water had pressed me up against. Human bones, an entire wall of them, clotted with the ragged remnants of clothes and belongings. Although some were adult, the majority were the malformed remains of those younger, the unwanted, I suppose, of the human monsters upstairs. At the top of the hideous mound, there was another grate. I climbed hand over hand, trying not to think about what supported me, or how long it would be able to hold my weight. The grate above was locked, of course it was. I had avoided a quick death by gunfire only to earn a longer, far more terrible one of starvation in the dark. There was another splash in the water down below, similar to the one that I had heard earlier. I angled my headlamp down. Half a dozen blind, red eyes stared back at me. Maybe my death wasn't as far away as I had thought. Just as I had feared, they were the biggest rats that I had ever seen. Their lips peeled back when they saw me. They climbed hungrily and without a hint of fear, given the pile around them. I figured they had been surviving on human flesh for quite some time now. I kicked at the nearest one. It dodged easily, leapt, and sank its fangs into my leg. It was the size of a cat, its black fur sleek and oily beneath my fingers as I fought to pull it away. Another sprang onto my back, its tiny claws scratching at my bare shoulder as it struggled to get closer to my neck. Its wormy tail was at least a foot long. Loose bones slipped beneath my feet, splashing into the water below. I was losing my balance, and more rats were already scurrying up the pile of bones. "Hit him in the eyes," a voice hissed from above me. It was the boy, Joey. "They don't like that." It wasn't as easy as he had made it sound, but it worked. While I swatted away the vermin, Joey unlocked the grate. After scrambling through and slamming it down on the gnashing teeth below, I asked him why he was helping me. "The boss says we're better off down here, where we can do what we want and take what we want. He says the ones above have made themselves weak through too much easy living. But I'd been outside once with Bert, back when I was barely old enough to walk. I want that, not this. If I can get you out of here, will you help me? And dripping and shaken, I nodded. I had one condition, however. We weren't leaving without Rosha. In the wavering light of my headlamp, I saw Joey grit his teeth. Oh, those guys' brains might be rotten from the sickness and too much booze, but they're not dumb. I used Bert's keys to get out of here, and it won't be long before he notices that they're gone. If I waltz back in there, he'll gut me without a second thought. It's too dangerous. I shook my head. I was going back for her, I told him, with or without his help. My heart raced. If he called my bluff and left me alone in this maze of dripping tunnels, I was a dead man. The pale boy sighed. He gestured for me to follow him. We went up a ladder and through a narrow, cobwebby shaft until he reached another one of those solid steel doors. He pressed his ear against it and listened. The clack of the key turning in the lock was horrifically loud. Its hinges creaked beneath so much heavy metal. We stuck our heads into another gas-lit hallway. It looked empty. Heaven, drunken piano notes echoed up from the ballroom. "Come on," Joey murmured. "They keep the girls down here." The hallway that he had led me to was lined with bolted, scratched-up doors. Somebody was weeping inside one of them. "My ma was locked up in one of these rooms almost all her life," Joey was saying. "And then one day she was just gone. Outlived her usefulness," the boss said. And then he laughed. "Your girl will be in that one at the end of the hall, if the boss isn't with her already." I ran to the last door on the left and unbolted it. Rosha looked up from where she sat in the corner of the bed, a trembling glass of whiskey in her hand. Pressing a finger to my lips, I gestured toward the hallway. As she sprang to her feet, I smelled cigarette smoke and heard the click of a pistol hammer being pulled back. "Every time a door opens in this place, I get a buzz down in my office," the boss sneered. "Or didn't you know?" The boss and two of his pearly-skinned goons stood to my right. Bert was on my left, his enormous Tommy gun in hand. There was no sign of Joey. "How the hell did you get out of that pit?" the boss chuckled. "You know what? I don't want to know. Nice seeing yous." He squeezed the trigger. I flung myself back through the door of Rosha's cell. Two splintered craters appeared in it where I had been standing seconds before, and then I noticed the smoke. "What's that?" the boss shouted. "Smells like something's on fire. Bert, go see what's burning. I'll take care of these two." Rosha and I crouched behind the tattered stained mattress. There was nowhere else to take cover. Had Joey set the blaze as a distraction? If so, I hoped he knew what he was doing. The boss, meanwhile, didn't seem to be in any hurry. He strode slowly into the room, firing a lazy shot at our hiding place. Clouds of dust and feathers flew up from where the bullet had ripped through the cloth. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I felt myself giving up. Here I was, hundreds of feet beneath the city that I thought I knew so well, about to be murdered by some diseased, rotted gangsters who still lived like it was the 1930s. The boss's bulk was blocking the door. He had 3 shots left in his revolver. There was no way out of this. No way that we were leaving this squalid little room alive. Before I knew what was happening, Rosha had sprung to her feet and gripped the brass table lamp and flung it at the boss's head. The impact barely staggered him, but it was enough. Rosha and I darted past and out the door before he could reestablish his aim. We started coughing almost immediately. Whether it was due to the confined space or the dusty filth of what was burning, I wasn't sure, but the air was thick with cloying smoke. Joey waved at us through the haze, indicating a way out. The boss's next 2 shots went wide as we ran to him. I could hear the big man cursing and shouting behind us, the chamber of his revolver nearly empty. My skin seemed to crackle in the heat. I pressed the cloth of my wet shirt over my face. I was sweating more than I ever had in my life, and with each passing second it was getting harder and harder to breathe. The staircase that we took crumbled into embers as we sprinted up it. From the rubbery odor in the air, the soles of my shoes were beginning to melt. The lights went out. Somebody had shut off the gas that powered the place's antique lighting. The only illumination now was the orange glow of distant flames. The hallway ahead ended in a T. Wails, screams, and a burst of gunfire reverberated from the left. Our little group veered right. Joey led us past a slime-covered empty swimming pool and through the remains of what appeared to have once been a bowling alley. Its peeling plaster now hung like Spanish moss from the ceiling. They really had given themselves every luxury down here, and now it was all going up in flames. I grunted in pain as my toes bashed against a table leg. With the fire so far away, it was nearly impossible to see. And then Joey opened a door and the fire roared in. The boy sprung back with a scream. I could sense him beginning to panic. The fire had changed course and burnt up his plans along with the gaudy wallpaper. "You got this," I reminded him. "You know all the ways out of here, and we're going to get to one before they find us." Joey looked at the wickedly curling flames in front of us and nodded. He didn't look convinced. We doubled back, and although we hadn't seen or heard anyone, I found myself still scanning the dark corners for Bert. The hallway where we had heard the gunfire was now suspiciously empty. As we crept down it, I knew that I would feel this hellish heat and see this awful orange glow in my nightmares until the day that I died. The smoke grew thicker every second until at last, we were in front of a thick metal door. The same one that we had come in through, I realized. Joey's fingers shook as he fiddled with the keys. "It's not working," he coughed. "Birdie must have changed the locks." The fire was here now, creeping around the corner like a living thing. "Give me those." Rosha grunted through the cloth that she held over her face. The padlock gave in on her second try. Joey must have been too tense to realize they had been using the wrong key, but it didn't matter now. We rushed out into the damp but cool air of the drainage tunnels and didn't wait around to see if anyone followed. I switched on my headlamp and did my best to decipher a route back to the surface. "Do you think they escaped through one of the other exits?" Rosha asked. Joey shrugged. "I don't know. The boss and the rest of them can burn for all I care. To think that I used to look up to them, that I wanted to be like them." The boy trailed off sickened. I tried to slow my heaving breaths, swapped the beam of my headlamp from side to side, and I listened for footsteps that never came. 4 minutes later, we were standing beneath the rainy, light-polluted night sky, so happy that we could have kissed the concrete. Gawking at the bright lights and tall buildings, Joey muttered that he needed some place to lay low for a while. He was an undocumented miner, and even after a lifetime underground, he could guess how difficult that would make life up here on the surface. Rosha wanted to go straight to the authorities. I thought about the gray-haired woman who had threatened me earlier and told her that that probably wasn't a good idea. "There's a hotel used by the elite in town," Rosha told us. "A place with no cameras where nobody checks IDs, and they forget your face the moment that you're through the door. I'll get us a room and give you the number. But right now you need to get yourself shots for rabies, tetanus, and a dozen other things. Go see a doctor and don't worry. I can take care of the kid." "I'm not just some kid, you know," Joey protested. "I saved both your asses back there, and you'd better not forget it." We told him that we wouldn't. A haze of smoke from the underground blaze filled the rainy air. In the distance, I heard the wail of sirens. If we didn't want to answer some very uncomfortable questions, it was time to disappear. Rosha made a phone call, then gave me an address and a room number. As I watched her and Joey walk off into the night, I glanced uneasily over my shoulder at the mouth of the drainage tunnel. For some reason, I couldn't help but feel like I was making a terrible mistake. There was a heap of old magazines and newspapers in the lobby of the dingy 24-hour clinic that I had visited, and a few of them contained articles about Isaac Goldham's murder, a multimillionaire, a real estate developer. He had gotten into a dispute with the local government over his next build site, and while the official causes were blurry, I knew the true reason. The structure was going to be built right on top of the complex that Rosha and I had escaped from. There was a possibility that the construction would have brought to light the horror beneath our feet. I thought about all the whistleblowers and reformers who had died in this city under mysterious circumstances, and I felt a shiver run up my spine. How many of them had seen the same sight in their final moments? A man with pearly white skin and a half-rotten face, flexing a knife, a garrote, or automatic weapon in his gloved hands. A living ghost who couldn't be traced. The perfect assassin for those in power. With my doctor visit complete, I hurried to the hotel address. Just as Rosha had said, it was clearly a high-end place, but I never would have guessed its function from the outside. The desk clerk didn't look up when I crossed the lobby. My heart raced while I waited for the elevator to reach the 4th floor. I hadn't realized how much in a single day these people had come to mean to me. Maybe right now Rosha was drying her hair after showering off the filth of such a nightmarish day. Maybe the kid Joey was sitting transfixed in front of the color television. 414, that was their room number. But as the elevator doors opened, I realized that its door was standing open. There's no need to describe what I found on the other side. It was easy enough to imagine. A hotel for the elites, Rosha had said. Maybe the desk worker was more observant than he had appeared. Maybe the employers of those psychos had told their contacts to keep an eye out for a slim blonde woman and a buff, pale teenager. Maybe just as the woman in the police station had warned, no place in this city was safe for someone who knew what I knew. I could have chosen to stay and fight, but I didn't. The names involved are made up, but now, decades later, even the real ones have probably been forgotten. I retreated to the West Coast into calmer line of work, but I never forgot those 2 insane days. I never overcame the fear that one day the closet door will creak open and I'll find myself looking up at one of the boss's descendants, his mouth stretched wide in a syphilis grin.